Dear listeners, a new day and a new story to discuss. Today, I'm going to tell you a story that interests me. Listen and write down what you think about this situation. I'm interested in your opinions. It was a morning like any other, or so I thought. The sun peeked through the blinds, casting a warm glow across the kitchen where I, Edward, sat with my cup of coffee. It was the kind of morning that promised a day of mundane routine, but life, as I was about to learn, is full of surprises. Eliza, my wife, was bustling around, getting ready for work. Her usual cheerful demeanor seemed slightly off today, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Running late again? I teased, trying to break the morning silence. She spun around, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. Yes, a bit. Big day at the office, you know. Her voice had a hurried edge, but I shrugged it off. I drove her to work, our conversation filled with the usual small talk. The radio played softly in the background, a comfortable soundtrack to our domestic routine. I watched her stride into her office building, her confident steps belying the brief look of unease I'd caught earlier. From there, I headed to the auto shop to drop off my car for servicing. The mechanic, a burly man with grease-stained hands, gave me a friendly nod. We'll take good care of her. She'll be ready by tomorrow. Thanks, Mike. I planned it this way. Gives me an excuse to walk to work and enjoy this beautiful day, I replied with a casual smile, though my thoughts were already drifting to the pile of work awaiting me. The walk to my office was uneventful, the city slowly waking up around me. My mind was preoccupied with the usual workday concerns until an unexpected power outage at the office threw everything into disarray. The sudden darkness was accompanied by a chorus of surprised exclamations from my colleagues. Our apologies, folks. There's an issue with the electrical panel. Electricians won't be here until later this evening, the director announced with a calmness that did little to soothe the general discontent. As head of the department, it fell on me to supervise the closing of the office. Make sure everything's locked up tight, I instructed my team. And don't forget to shut down your systems properly. We don't want any data losses. With the office secured and my team dispersed, I found myself walking back home earlier than usual. The evening air was cool and refreshing, a stark contrast to the stuffiness of the office. As I strolled through the yard, lost in thought, a familiar car caught my attention. It was Gregory's, Eliza's boss. Curiosity piqued, I watched as Eliza stepped out of the car, clutching a package. Their movements seemed hurried, almost secretive. A cold knot formed in my stomach. They quickly disappeared into the entryway of a nearby house. My mind raced with questions and suspicions, but I forced myself to walk away. Back home, the silence of the empty house was suffocating. Driven by a gnawing suspicion, I turned on my computer and logged into Eliza's online banking. A breach of privacy, I know, but I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was amiss. The transaction history was like a punch to the gut. She had made purchases at the mall that morning, contradicting her story of a busy day at work. The pieces of a puzzle I didn't want to complete began to fall into place. The clock ticked away, each second stretching longer than the last as I waited for Eliza to come home. When she finally did, her voice was light, filled with trivial details of her day and her shopping escapades. I couldn't respond. My mind was a turbulent sea of emotions, confusion, betrayal, anger. She didn't seem to notice my silence as she continued chattering about the long lines at the store and how she had picked out a beautiful sweater and shirt for me. I stood up, unable to bear the pretense any longer. Ignoring the purchases she laid out, I retreated to my study, the weight of her betrayal heavy on my shoulders. Eliza followed soon after, her voice laced with concern. Edward, you've been so quiet. Is everything all right? I wanted to confront her, to unleash the storm of questions and accusations brewing inside me. But the words wouldn't come. I simply sat there, headphones on, drowning in my thoughts and the soft music that provided a temporary escape from the harsh reality. Eliza lingered at the door, a frown creasing her forehead. You're worrying me, Edward. Talk to me, she pleaded. But I couldn't. Not yet. The revelation of her deceit was too fresh, too painful. I remained silent, a statue in the storm of our crumbling marriage. The next morning dawned with a heavy air, a stark contrast to the usual light that filled our home. I, Edward, awoke to the sound of Eliza humming in the kitchen, a routine melody that now seemed out of tune with my turmoil. The previous night's revelations hung over me like a dark cloud, casting a shadow on everything I once believed about our life together. I lumbered into the kitchen, my movements robotic, a stark contrast to Eliza's seemingly cheerful disposition. She was flipping pancakes, a Sunday tradition that suddenly felt hollow. "Good morning, Edward. I thought I'd make your favorite today," she chirped, trying to pierce the silence that had enveloped us since last night. "Morning," I muttered, my voice devoid of warmth. I took a seat at the table, my eyes fixed on the coffee mug, avoiding her gaze. The tension in the room was palpable, a silent storm brewing. Eliza brought the plate of pancakes to the table, her attempts at normalcy painfully evident. "You seem off today. Did something happen at work yesterday?" she inquired, her eyes searching mine for a clue. "Work was fine. They sent us home early because of a power outage," I replied tersely, my mind racing back to the sight of her getting out of Gregory's car. The image was like a thorn in my thoughts, persistent and sharp. She sat across from me, her brows knitting together in concern. "You're sure everything is okay? You've been so distant since last night," she pressed, her voice laced with worry. I wanted to confront her, to demand an explanation for the deceit that was unraveling our life. But the words were trapped behind a wall of disbelief and hurt. "I'm fine," I said, the lie tasting bitter on my tongue. Eliza reached across the table, her hand hesitantly moving towards mine. I instinctively pulled away, the distance between us more than just physical. She retracted her hand, a look of hurt flashing across her face. "Edward, if there's something bothering you, please tell me. We've always been able to talk about everything," she implored, her voice a mix of confusion and frustration. I looked up at her, the facade of normalcy she was desperately clinging to. How could she sit there, acting as if nothing was wrong? How could she betray our vows with such ease? "Eliza, I just need some space right now," I said, my voice hollow. She stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. "Space? What does that mean, Edward? We're married. We're supposed to be in this together," she exclaimed, her composure cracking. I said I'm fine, I repeated, standing up to leave the room. The walls felt like they were closing in, each family portrait a reminder of a happiness that now felt tainted. "Where are you going?" Eliza asked, her voice rising in desperation. "To think," I replied, escaping to the sanctuary of my study. I closed the door behind me, the click of the latch sounding like the final note in a symphony of our fractured marriage. Inside, surrounded by the familiarity of my books and work, I tried to find solace. But peace was elusive, the echo of Eliza's confusion and hurt reverberating in my mind. I stared at the computer screen, the cursor blinking back at me, a silent witness to the chaos in my thoughts. After what felt like hours, I heard a gentle knock on the door. "Edward, can we talk?" Eliza's voice was soft, almost timid. "Not now, Eliza," I replied, my voice strained. I could hear her sigh on the other side of the door, a sound heavy with unspoken words and emotions. "Okay, I'll be here when you're ready," she said, her footsteps receding. The rest of the day passed in a blur of silent meals and unspoken thoughts. The house, once a haven of love and laughter, now felt like a battleground of unspoken accusations and hidden truths. As night fell, the tension between us remained, a silent sentinel of the turmoil within. The day had dragged on, each hour heavier than the last. The clock struck 7, signaling the end of another day, yet the unease within me, Edward, lingered like an unwelcome guest. Dinner was a quiet affair, Eliza's attempts at conversation falling flat against the wall of my silence. The clinking of cutlery against plates filled the air, a symphony of normalcy that couldn't drown out the turmoil in my mind. Post-dinner, I found myself in the living room, pretending to watch television. Eliza sat beside me, knitting away at some project or another. The very air between us crackled with unspoken words and pent-up emotions. "Edward, please talk to me. This silence is unbearable." Eliza finally broke the ice, her voice laced with a mix of desperation and concern. I turned to her, the floodgates of my restraint weakening. "Eliza, why were you in Gregory's car yesterday?" The question, blunt and direct, hung in the air like a charged cloud ready to burst. Her knitting needles stopped mid-stitch. "Gregory's car? Oh, he just offered me a ride since I was running late. Nothing unusual about it," she replied, a little too quickly, her eyes avoiding mine. "But why did you lie about being at work in the morning?" "I saw the bank transactions, Eliza. You were shopping, not working." My voice was steady, but inside, a storm was brewing. Eliza put down her knitting, her hands trembling slightly. I wanted to surprise you with a gift. I didn't think you'd mind," she stammered, her facade of calmness crumbling. "A surprise? By lying? And getting into your boss's car, going into a building together? It doesn't add up, Eliza." I could feel my voice rising, a mix of anger and pain lacing my words. "Edward, I swear, It's not what you think. Gregory and I are just colleagues. That's all there is to it, she pleaded, her eyes now meeting mine, begging me to believe her. How can I trust your words, Eliza? After the lies? How can I be sure there's nothing more between you and Gregory? The questions poured out of me, each one echoing the betrayal I felt. Eliza reached out to me, her hand shaking. Please, Edward, you have to believe me. I would never do anything to hurt our marriage. I love you. I pulled away from her touch, the physical distance mirroring the emotional chasm that had formed between us. I saw the two of you together, Eliza. You can't expect me to just ignore that. Tears brimmed in her eyes, her voice a whisper. I made a mistake, Edward. I should have told you about the ride with Gregory. But please, don't let this misunderstanding ruin what we have. Is it just a misunderstanding, Eliza? Or is there more you're not telling me? My heart raced, a part of me dreading the answer. She wiped away a tear, her voice barely audible. There's nothing more. It was just a ride. That's all. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with the weight of unsaid words and unshed tears. I stood up, the need to escape the oppressive atmosphere overwhelming me. Where are you going? Eliza's voice was faint, a mix of fear and resignation. I need to clear my head. With those words, I stepped out into the cool night air, leaving behind the suffocating confines of the house and the web of lies and half-truths. Outside, the night sky was clear, the stars twinkling indifferently to the human drama unfolding beneath them. I walked aimlessly, the images of Eliza and Gregory replaying in my mind, a loop of betrayal and suspicion. After what felt like hours, I returned home, the house dark and silent. Eliza was asleep on the couch, a blanket draped over her. Seeing her there, vulnerable and alone, a pang of something akin to guilt washed over me. But it was quickly overshadowed by the sense of betrayal that still lingered. I quietly made my way to the spare room, the events of the day replaying in my mind. The bed felt foreign, a symbol of the distance that had grown between Eliza and me. As I lay there, staring into the darkness, the truth of our situation was inescapable. The night of revelations had laid bare the fractures in our marriage. The trust one once had in Eliza was shattered, replaced by a chasm of doubt and hurt. As sleep finally claimed me, I knew that our relationship had changed irrevocably. The silence of the night was a testament to the uncertainty and pain that lay ahead. The morning after was draped in a heavy fog, both outside my window and within the confines of my heart. I, Edward, rose from a sleep that brought no rest, my mind a tangled web of the previous night's confrontation with Eliza. The house was silent, the kind of silence that speaks volumes, filled with the echoes of our unresolved tensions. I shuffled into the kitchen, the automatic motions of making coffee the only thing keeping me anchored in the present. The aroma of the brew did little to lift the heavy atmosphere that had settled over our home. Eliza entered the kitchen, her eyes puffy and red from a night spent crying. She hesitated at the doorway, as if unsure of her welcome. "Good morning, Edward," she said softly, her voice a faint shadow of its usual cheerfulness. "Morning," I replied, my response clipped, the word hanging in the air between us like a barrier. I poured myself a cup of coffee, the black liquid mirroring the dark thoughts swirling in my mind. Eliza moved to the other side of the kitchen, starting to prepare breakfast in an attempt to impose some normalcy on the strained situation. The clinking of utensils was a jarring sound in the silence. "Edward, can we talk about last night?" Eliza's voice broke through the quiet, tentative, and unsure. I took a deep breath, my grip on the coffee mug tightening. "What is there to talk about, Eliza? You lied to me, and I can't just overlook that." She flinched at my words, her hands pausing in their task. "I know I made a mistake by not telling you the truth about the mall and Gregory, but please believe me, there's nothing going on between us." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the desperation in her eyes. But the seed of doubt planted in my mind refused to let go. "How can I trust what you're saying now, Eliza? How do I know this isn't just another lie?" Eliza approached me, her movements slow and cautious. "I understand why you're upset, and I am truly sorry. I should have been honest with you from the start." Her attempt to bridge the gap between us felt like too little, too late. "Sorry doesn't change what happened. It doesn't erase the doubts or the hurt," I said, my voice a mix of anger and sorrow. Eliza reached out, her hand stopping just short of touching mine. "What can I do to make this right, Edward? I'll do anything to fix this." I pulled away, the physical distance echoing the emotional one. "I don't know if this can be fixed. The trust is broken, Eliza." The sound of the front door opening interrupted our tense conversation. Our daughter, Anna, entered the kitchen, her presence a sudden reminder of the family we had built together. "Morning, Mom," Dad, what's for breakfast? Her innocent question was a jarring contrast to the tension in the room. Eliza quickly wiped her eyes, turning to smile at Anna. Morning, sweetheart. How about some pancakes? Anna, oblivious to the undercurrents, nodded enthusiastically. Sounds great. I watched as Eliza busied herself with cooking, putting on a brave face for our daughter. The normalcy of the scene was a stark contrast to the turmoil inside me. I felt a pang of guilt for the pain I knew I was causing Eliza, but the sense of betrayal was still too raw, too fresh to ignore. As we sat down to breakfast, the usual chatter filled the room. But underneath the surface, the tension between Eliza and me simmered like a dormant volcano, ready to erupt at any moment. The morning after had brought no resolution, only a deeper realization of the rift that had formed between us. As I sipped my coffee, the bitter taste mirrored the bitterness in my heart. The path ahead was unclear, shrouded in the fog of hurt feelings and broken trust. The future of our family, once so certain, now hung in the balance, a delicate thread fraying under the weight of unspoken words and hidden truths. The world outside continued its relentless spin, but within the walls of our home, time seemed to crawl painfully slow. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows through the windows, I, Edward, found myself pacing the living room, trapped in a relentless cycle of doubt and confusion. Eliza had retreated to the kitchen, her usual sanctuary in times of stress, under the guise of preparing dinner. The clattering of pots and pans was a subtle reminder of the normalcy we once shared, now shattered by mistrust. Edward, can we please sit down and talk? Eliza's voice cut through the silence, her plea hanging heavily in the air. I stopped pacing and turned towards her, my heart heavy. What's left to talk about, Eliza? You've made your choices. She walked over to me, a determined look on her face. I want to explain everything. There's more to this than you know. I sighed, the weight of the situation bearing down on me. All right, explain. I'm listening. Eliza took a deep breath, her hands nervously twisting the hem of her apron. The other day, when you saw me with Gregory, it wasn't planned. He offered me a lift because my car wouldn't start. I didn't want to bother you with it. I crossed my arms, skepticism etched on my face. And the mall? The purchases you made when you were supposed to be at work. She bit her lip, a hint of guilt flashing in her eyes. I wanted to buy you a gift, something special to celebrate our anniversary next week. I thought it would be a nice surprise. The revelation hit me like a wave, the guilt of my accusations mixing with the hurt of her deception. You could have told me the truth, Eliza. Instead, you chose to lie. Her eyes welled up with tears. I know, and I'm sorry. I didn't realize how much it would hurt you. I was foolish to think I could keep it a secret. I ran a hand through my hair, the frustration and pain of the past few days bubbling to the surface. Do you realize how much your lies have cost us, Eliza? Our trust, our peace of mind. Eliza stepped closer, her voice trembling. I do, and I regret it deeply. I never meant to hurt you or our family. You have to believe me, Edward. I looked into her eyes, searching for the sincerity behind her words. I want to believe you, Eliza, but it's not that simple. Trust isn't something that can be repaired overnight. She reached out, her hand gently touching my arm. I know, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to rebuild that trust. Please, give me a chance to make things right. I hesitated, the touch reigniting memories of better times. I don't know if I can, Eliza. I need time to think, to process all of this. Eliza nodded, a tear escaping down her cheek. I understand. Take all the time you need. I'll be here, waiting and hoping for a chance to mend what I've broken. As she turned and walked back to the kitchen, the smell of dinner wafting through the air, I was left standing there, torn between the love I still felt for her and the betrayal that had driven a wedge between us. The unraveling truth had revealed the complexities of our situation. While Eliza's intentions might have been innocent, her actions had set in motion a chain of events that had shaken the very foundation of our marriage. The path to healing was uncertain, obscured by the shadows of doubt and hurt that lingered in the corners of our once happy home. The night fell, wrapping the house in darkness, mirroring the uncertainty that clouded our future. The dawn of the decisive day broke with a crimson hue, painting the sky with strokes of uncertainty and apprehension. I, Edward, stood by the window of our bedroom, which had become my solitary refuge in the turmoil of our home. The house was silent, but the quiet was deceptive, charged with the weight of impending decisions. Eliza was already up, her movements in the kitchen below a faint echo of the routines we once shared with ease. The aroma of brewing coffee wafted up, a reminder of mornings that now felt like distant memories. Descending the stairs, I braced myself for the conversation that lay ahead. Each step felt heavy, like I was walking towards a crossroads where the path we would choose could change everything. In the kitchen, Eliza turned at my approach, her expression a mix of hope and trepidation. "Good morning, Edward." "Coffee." Her voice was soft, almost fragile. I nodded silently, taking the proffered mug. The warmth of the cup in my hands was a stark contrast to the chill in my heart. "We need to talk, Eliza," I began, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. She took a deep breath, steeling herself. "Yes, we do. I've been thinking a lot about everything. About us." The morning light streamed in, casting long shadows across the floor. I took a seat at the kitchen table, the same place where we had shared countless meals and conversations. But now, it felt like a battleground where the fate of our marriage would be decided. "Eliza, these past few days have been some of the hardest in our life together. The trust that was the foundation of our relationship has been shaken," I said, the words heavy with emotion. "I know, and I'm so sorry, Edward. I never wanted to cause you pain. My actions were thoughtless, but they weren't malicious," she replied, her eyes pleading for understanding. I sipped the coffee, its bitterness mirroring the state of my thoughts. "But the damage is done, Eliza. Trust, once broken, isn't easily mended. I've been lost in a sea of doubt, wondering if we can ever go back to how things were." Eliza reached across the table, her hand stopping just short of mine. "Is there a way for us to move forward, to rebuild what we've lost? I'm willing to do whatever it takes." I looked at her, seeing the woman I had fallen in love with, now clouded by the mistakes that had brought us to this brink. I've been asking myself that same question. Can we move past this? Can the wounds heal? Or is it kinder to let go, to free ourselves from the pain? Her hand finally bridged the gap, touching mine lightly. "I don't want to let go, Edward. I believe we're stronger than this. We've been through so much together. This can be another chapter in our story, one where we overcome the odds." The sincerity in her voice was palpable, but so was the reality of our situation. "It's not just about what we want, Eliza. It's about what's healthy for us, for our family. Can we truly be happy again? Or will the shadow of this always loom over us?" She withdrew her hand, a silent acknowledgement of the complexity of our predicament. "I understand your doubts, and I can't force your decision. But know that my love for you hasn't wavered. It's stronger than ever, even in the face of this storm." The room fell silent, the ticking of the kitchen clock marking the passage of moments heavy with unspoken fears and unshed tears. The final decision loomed over us, a choice that would alter the course of our lives, for better or for worse. "I need time, Eliza. Time to think, to weigh everything. This decision isn't just about now. It's about our future," I said, the weight of the moment pressing down on me. She nodded, a tear escaping down her cheek. "Take all the time you need. I'll be here, waiting and hoping." As I stood up, leaving the kitchen and the remnants of our morning conversation behind, I knew that the decision I faced was monumental. It was a choice between holding on to the fragments of a love that had defined my life or letting go in the hope of finding peace and perhaps, one day, a new beginning. The final decision was mine to make, a path to choose in a journey that was as uncertain as it was inevitable. The future, once a tapestry of shared dreams and plans, now lay before me like an unfinished puzzle, waiting for the next piece to fall into place.